I wanted to ask if you heard anything about letting your garden produce for 4 years before you take a harvest. A friend of mine is a Jehovah's Witness, told me that he believes, according to the scripture, that it is ordained that a tree in your garden should not be harvested until the fourth year. Is there any scriptural mention of this? I hope you can shed a light on this subject.
I'm not particularly sure about that, but I do know that the Jewish people practice every 7 years letting the ground rest. And so I asked God about that because I wanted to really follow, His order. And his answer is quite interesting. Have you noticed in nature that I don't let my garden rest every 7 years? It says, I wrote that for people who were under the effect of the fall, who were tilling their ground. And because they tilled the ground, it was stressed, and they had to rest every 7 years. But in nature, it's never stressed, and it's always resting. And the same is happening in your garden. There's no stress. It's not being worked. It's all being supported by the covering, and so it's always resting.
Okay. And anything about like not harvesting the first year or anything like that?
Well, in most cases, they don't produce the first year. When I first came here, I was 5 to 7 years before I saw any fruit. But now, because I have nutrient-dense soil, I got 30 apples on my tree the first year. I grafted last year, cyanwood in my trees, and in 2 months I had eight apples. I took them off because I didn't want to break the branch, but it's, I'm challenged with abundance. It's just there, and it happens effortlessly. It's not a stress of the tree.
Why do you graft? If God wanted that tree to have two different types of fruit, he would have made it that way.
He would have, but God grafts. God created the nation of Israel as a chosen people. Through them, he revealed himself. And they were called the olive branch. It relates them to a tree. But he grafted us, the Gentiles, into the wild olive graft is grafted in. Paul writes of this in Romans. And so God has grafted us into the nation of Israel to experience all the benefits that they have. So he does it. So if he does it, I'm going to do it.
What type of Swedish fingerling potato does Paul have?
I don't know its name. Someone gave it to me. People are always coming by here and dropping off stuff. And so just someone told me this is a Swedish fingerling. I just put it in the ground and been eating it for 20 years now. It's been great.
How long was it before Paul no longer needed to thin his carrots, i.e. the soil was adapted enough by the covering?
I don't know the exact year, and it depends. Like in the orchard, it was immediate because it's all wood chips. But my garden, where I was tilling, it took a little while. But like I said, now it's just, you guys saw it out there, how thick they were, and they're totally big because the ground's soft and they just move out of each other's way. Where in compacted stuff they can't, and so they're just jammed.
Can I fertilize newly planted blueberry plants with fish emulsion?
You can fertilize anything you want. Over time, you won't need to because if you notice in nature, nothing's fertilized, and in the wood chip environment, everything's provided. So it's like maybe like an early endeavor, but something you'll never do later.
Oh, by the way, with planting the trees, we talked about how it'll make the bowl down there, and the roots is still gonna. Somebody found that article.
Oh, cool.
Put a link in that video.
Great, wonderful, awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I was reading part of it. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. In the early years of his newly planted orchard, did Paul's fruit trees have issues with sun scald? At what age does a young tree no longer have issues with that? I'm in Sun 7A, which is pretty close to us.
Mm-hmm. I haven't had any problem with sun scald, but I had a lot of other problems with bugs and fungus and that kind of thing, but sun scald has never been a problem.
How long after putting the covering down in the orchard did all of those problems that you were having stop or fade away?
It was awesome. It took, it was progressive, and some things, went, like I had earwigs right up front, and like maybe 2 years into it, they weren't there anymore. But the scab was the longest to get rid of, apple scab of fungus. And I used to have to spray every year with lime sulfur, but man, it's been years now since I have it sprayed and I've got totally clean stuff. So, some things take longer than others, but it eventually all gets clean because that's nature.
Now, that's the first time I've heard you mention lime sulfur.
Lime, sulfur, or organic minerals. Lime and sulfur, those are organic minerals. And those are a fungicide. They'll kill fungus. And so I use those freely because of their being natural. They're not toxic, you know. So I did use them because otherwise I had major scab in my apples and it would ruin them. So but man, it was labor intensive, man. I was, like as soon as they bloom, like every few weeks, I have to spray all those trees, man. It's just like a lot of work, kind of thing. So it's just so awesome now, man, just to not do anything because you don't need to.
I was wondering if he would show how he plants early things like lettuce, spinach, things of that sort. How much mulch, and does he leave the rows uncovered until the plants emerge?
Well, in my garden, I just planted all that, and I just used in my garden is my compost from the chicken pen, which is just very fine material. So I just make it, like I did today with my other things I planted, a small group, plant the seeds, and they're good. And depending on weather, if it's warm, they're up in a week.
And that's when you would push back the wood chips?
Yeah, now in my garden I don't need to because it's all compost, but if I have wood chips, then I have to pull them away. But the advantage of that, when you pull the wood chips back, you have a little ridge, and it knocks the wind out, so it's actually warmer down below. So the seeds come up quicker. So it actually creates a little like kind of a greenhouse effect without the top.
That was one of the things that somebody was asking me the other day, a friend of mine, is when you pull the wood chips back, which direction do you want to have the pile be at? Do you want to
Whatever's
closer
convenient
towards
for
the
you.
sun or away from,
Doesn't matter.
or wind?
The sun's way above the shade from the wood chips, so whatever's convenient for you. I usually just pull it to myself because that's just instead of pushing, it's easier to pull. So that's what I do.
I started my new Back to Eden garden in February when there are no leaves on the trees, which means that my wood chips are lacking the greens that Paul talks about. Will the lack of green in my wood chips need to be addressed?
Probably not.
The thing that kills me about this guy, sometimes it's like, a 10-minute answer, and sometimes like, nah. This guy sent me this message, and he's like, okay, Paul, give me your wisdom. He's like, nah. You're good. If he is worried about it, can he take grass clippings?
Grass clippings or leaves, whatever you want. Yeah, just lay on top of your wood chips. Don't mix them in. Don't bury them. Just cover on top. Layer. Always layer. Never mix.
How thick? So this is a question somebody else asked me. They have access to a lot of grass clippings. They already put their wood chips down. How deep of grass clippings can they put without adverse effects, I guess?
Well, as long as the plants can get above it, it's great. Your plants have to be out in the air, exposed to light. So, the challenge with grass clippings is if it gets wet, they get real slimy, and so you can have kind of a compacted, caked, slimy mess kind of thing. Where I love to put them under the wood chips and have the wood chips on top because that's a nice surface to be on. Wood chips never get anything but comfortable. We've been on it all day today, and it's awesome. So grass clippings and straw, when they get wet, can get kind of slimy. So the wood chips is a nice finish cover.
Now this one I've never had a problem of, and I've never heard anybody having a problem of, except for my neighbor who said it would happen, and now this person. When I planted last year, I had trouble when I pulled back the wood chips away for planting in the soil. After a while, the wind blew the wood chips back on the rows, and the seeds were covered again with wood chips. Is there any way to avoid this, or is it not really a problem? Will the plant survive under the wood chips?
What was the problem initially? He said I had a problem, but I didn't get what that was.
So basically, he planted last year, and he pulled the wood chips back, planted in the dirt, and then waited for them to sprout up. During that time, the wind blew, knocked over the wood chips, and back covering the seed, the plant, the whatever. Will that plant be able to get up through the wood chips?
Probably.
Or does he have to pull it back? Or
No, I wouldn't. Once they're planted, I wouldn't mess with it. I think they'll push through.
Even though the
Which is
wind
yeah.
or cast or whatever blew
Sure,
over
yeah,
the wood
it's okay.
chips,
They'll push through.
it should still be able to push through.
Yeah. Well, you look at those bulbs out there, those daffodils. I mean, I bear them every year with wood chips. They push through. Just wood chips are not like dirt. They're not heavy and they're not compacted, so there's a lot of airspace, so stuff can get through.